Nebeneinander and Nacheinander, Sirens and the Dichotomy of Art's Apprehension. What Stephen contemplates in Proteus, Bloom lives in Sirens, as Joyce presents his fuga per canonem, both in the Nebeneinander as sheet music, and in the Nacheinander as performance. The opening 60 lines stand as notes on a stave to their unfolding over the course of the episode, where Joyce has readers sing his Song of Many Voices by the rules. As yet another form of doubling in Joyce's Dublin, the dual presentation reminds readers that form in Art's Apprehension is a communication between artist and audience. Everything is doubled in James Joyce's Dublin. There are two protagonists. Stephen Dedalus, back from a portrait of the artist as a young man, joins Leopold Bloom in this Irish odyssey. There are two antagonists, or rather antagonisms. In Portrait, they were the nets flung at a newly born Irish soul, which Stephen claims, hold it back from flight. You, Davin, talk to me of nationality, language, religion. I shall try to fly by those nets, says Stephen, railing against the restraints on his artistic freedom. Really only two nets, language being a part of nationality. In Ulysses, the antagonisms return as spiritual and material restraints upon the Irish people. Stephen's shaving mirror tells the tale, a symbol of Irish art, the cracked looking-glass of a servant. The servant is the Irish artist. The cracked looking-glass is a unique culture expressed in a borrowed language, English, and under the constraints of an alien moral authority, Rome's Catholic Church. Joyce gives flesh and blood to the antagonisms in the first and second episodes. Opening the novel atop a Martello tower, Buck Mulligan blesses Dublin's snot-green bay in his yellow dressing gown, pus-stained image of a priest's alb, demonstrating the depth of the church's infection. Episode 2 reinvents the British antagonism as Garrett Deasy, Tory schoolmaster who prepares Ireland's next generation. He misquotes England's slogan as he sifts Stephen his pay in British coin. The doubling extends beyond the narrative, even splitting the text. In episode 7, Joyce sets pictureless captions as mocking counterpoints to the narrative, as when he follows the gentleman of the press with gross-booted draymen delivering beer. In Cyclops, even the narrator splits in two, the saga of Bloom and the Citizen told twice, first by an unnamed character whom we name commentator, colloquially describing the scene but adding his own color, and then again retold in a series of distinct voices reminiscent of the press, courts, and Bible, etc., each section answering commentator in its characteristic style. Where all commentators saw was Bloom hauling down the cobble's side saddle on some jarvey, Joyce's snide narrator describes Bloom's retreat as a vision in biblical styling of Elijah ascending. The doubling goes straight through the novel. Penelope still seems broken, in a sense, split into two periods and by two periods at lines 18,747 and 18,1609, the episode's only punctuation. Her story is related first in 4 paragraphs, tending from the present back to her childhood in Gibraltar, followed by a coordinated set of 4 paragraphs, recalling her life as lived up to Bloomsday night, in opposition of having choices and of having made choices. And in Sirens, the doubling pits the opening 60 lines against the rest of the episode, apparently 2 versions of the same material, as in outline and article or table of contents and book. In Aeolus, the captions appear to mock the narrative as if saying, a photo is worth 1,000 words, who needs your eloquent speeches? And in Cyclops, the split suggests irony as well, but the fragments opening Sirens don't seem to mock anything. Are we missing a clue to getting Joyce's point? Joyce purposefully doesn't make his works easy to get. In his 1901 essay, The Day of the Rabblement, which begins, "No man," said the Nolan, "can be a lover of the true or the good unless he abhors the multitude," a quote regarding Giordano Bruno of Nola, Italy, Joyce beguilingly left the Nolan unexplained, his brother Stanislaus says, in the hope that readers of the article should have at first a false impression that he was quoting some little-known Irish writer, so that when they discovered their error, the name Giordano Bruno might perhaps awaken some interest in his life and work. Laymen, he repeated, should be encouraged to think. Let's consider another form of doubling. In Proteus, Stephen ponders the aesthetic theory of Gotthold Lessing, the first critic to attempt a scientific approach to aesthetics, according to Bernard Bosanquet in A History of Aesthetic. Lessing deduces the distinction between poetry and painting from the nature of their respective media, and in doing so pioneers the true road of modern aesthetic, says Bosanquet. Lessing distinguishes the Nebeneinander, German side by side, in sculpture and painting from the Nacheinander, German one after another, in music and poetry. Recognizing that painting employs in its imitations quite different media or signs from poetry, the former employing shapes and colors in space, the latter articulate tones in time, Lessing reasons that plastic arts, painting, sculpture for instance, deal with bodies, things that present one next to another, and that such as poetry, music, or drama deal with actions, things that present one after the other. Hence, the medium determines the message's form. Doomed to an instant, art in the Nebeneinander must select the most pregnant moment, and, fated to work out over time, the Nacheinander must seek that which awakens the most sensuous image. Joyce would have seen these lines. Bosanquet's second edition appeared just after Joyce arrived in Paris in 1903, within months of his 22nd birthday, the day he began Stephen Hero. In his history, Bosanquet offers his theory of what unifies people's appreciation of beauty in different times and places, a notion Stephen Dedalus voices in Stephen Hero, stating that as the digestive systems of a Chinaman, Greek, or Coptic are identical, so should be beauty's experience. The process of apprehending beauty is universal and should be the same everywhere for all humans. For Bosanquet, art's apprehension is a single process, an evolution from the ancient paradigms of Greek form to the modern experiments in symbol and character. At the transition stood Lessing, according to Bosanquet, a foot in both camps. While rooted in Aristotle, Lessing adopted a modern approach to art. If we take Joyce at Stephen's word, who would create an entire science of aesthetic, we might see Joyce's purpose in Proteus as driving readers to think about Lessing, a thought he conjures twice. For what Stephen contemplates in Proteus, Bloom lives in Sirens, where readers sing Joyce's literary fugue or fuga per canonem. His Song of Many Voices translates song into text, arranging narrative vignettes as if instruments playing repeating and overlapping themes. While the themes are expressed Nacheinander through the ineluctable modality of the audible, gaining their sense as one reads through the narrative, the episode opens with the themes displayed Nebeneinander, all at once. The fragments, roughly paralleling their chronological appearance in the episode, don't seem to make sense on their own. Still, if we follow Lessing's example, considering the presentation from the perspective of the artist's work and medium, we realize that composers don't give musicians plots and characters, they give them notes on staves. These obscure fragments stand to the artist's imagination as, say, a given sequence of notes would to a musician's eye. Joyce offers the episode in two forms, Nacheinander in performance and Nebeneinander as sheet music. Joyce shares much with Lessing, who in his day railed against French Academy classicalists for misinterpreting Aristotle's observations as rules and manifests. Lessing was among the first to recognize Aristotle's descriptions as advice, not pronouncement. Boussinquet says, "No one man in modern times has done more than Lessing to show the futility of art formulae uncritically accepted from tradition, and to substitute for them that living insight which reveals the common root of human nature in the classical as in the romantic world." In his Drama and Life essay, Joyce agreed, calling these rules a syllabus of green-room properties and cautions to authors, which in after ages were foolishly set up as the canons of dramatic art. While establishing his own aesthetic tenets during his early trip to Paris in 1903, and then later in 1904 having moved to Pola, Italy, Joyce too would turn to a refreshed Aristotle, specifically a view espoused by S.H. Butcher, whose third edition of his translation of and commentary on Aristotle's Poetics, issued in 1902, had evoked Boussinquet's 1904 response in his Histories second edition. In Joyce's Pola notebook, he links lines to St. Thomas that are ultimately based on Aristotle. The first Pola note, a paraphrase of Aristotle's opening to the Nicomachean Ethics. And, as to the second note, Butcher refers readers to sections of Poetics, Metaphysics, and Problems where Aristotle analyzes the condition of art's apprehension in terms of a formal cause, as Joyce had in his earlier Paris notebook, a cause entailing two acts, one sensual, a cognition, the other intellectual, a recognition. In physics, Aristotle showed how a formal cause derives from a thing's arrangement, shape, or appearance, such that an octave, for instance, is caused by wires stretched to lengths in a 2-to-1 ratio. But since beauty is a concept and not a thing, it may only be held intellectually. And wires of any length make no noise until plucked. Therefore, one cannot apprehend the octave until one hears the octave. Hence, the conditions of art include both form grasped intellectually, as in the ratio, as well as content grasped sensually, as in hearing the strings plucked. Butcher, following Aristotle, says that objective laws of art are deduced not from an inquiry into the beautiful, but from an observation of art as it is and of the effects which it produces, a point Joyce notes in Paris, March 28, when, according to a letter to his mother, he was up to his neck in Aristotle's Metaphysics. The hacked bit of wood, Joyce notes, that resembles a cow is not beautiful. Beauty resides in the viewer's appreciation of the cow form in the wood. Hence, while beauty is some characteristic organization, it only becomes so when recognized as such. In this way, Aristotle suggests beauty is what pleases when seen. While creating his own work in working out his own aesthetic, Joyce too follows Aristotle, for whom only two things exist, stuff and how it changes, or being in motion. Change comes in rational terms, like one domino striking another, the one moving had been moved in turn. Of course, that yields an infinite regress where no motion is first. Religion solves that dilemma, putting God's act first. Aristotle solved it with a rational principle. Motion only begins at the natural ends. There were two ends in Aristotle's system, the empyrean, or highest heaven, where all physical motion originates, and the free soul of humanity, whose motion is spiritual. Aristotle saw the two motions as one, a creative power embodied in a forward trajectory or teleology, an open end, as it were. Finished things or particulars were complete, done, that particular rock, this particular score. Only creative things were open-ended and thus universal. Celestial motion urged objects to take their natural state, which explains why water always or universally seeks the lowest level. But that universal motion, in its original form, was cyclical, like the rhythm of the seasons or the course of the stars. For Aristotle, rhythm is the first or formal relation, as Joyce notes in his Paris book on March 25th. And as far as Aristotle was concerned, whether in physics or art, motion universally relates effect to cause. Aristotle explained physical motion as a participation in that celestial power. Spiritual motion, too, acts as a participation, one which allows us to share in the heavenly rhythms all around us, whether imitated in nature, song, or drama. Humans, composed of matter and spirit with a unique psyche or soul, can be moved like any other object, but also move spiritually, changing ourselves and our world. To demonstrate that participation, Aristotle pointed to rhetoric, its power to move people both spiritually, which is to say intellectually, as well as physically, as in stirring a mob. Aristotle sought that power's source not in the artifact, a particular player's speech, but rather the creative act. In Poetics, Aristotle explains how an inanimate artifact, text in a writer's case, can move something as if alive. Butcher says a work of poetic art, as Aristotle conceives it, is not indeed in a literal sense alive. The form or essence lives truly only in the mind of the artist who conceived the work. The artist, or the spectator who has entered into the artist's thought, by a mental act, lends life to the artistic creation. The artistic creation is in truth not alive, but merely the semblance of a living reality. In this way, a song may be a dead thing until played, but once played, the rhythms resurrect the work's universality through the hearer's soul. In short, as Joyce noted on March 27, art imitates nature. Why, then, does Joyce double his novel, and why specifically show readers both the sheet music and the fugue's performance in Sirens? Ulysses serves two functions for Joyce. While exploring how art moves a reader, Joyce creates text that moves the reader. In describing the seductions of music, Joyce exposed both sides of what it takes to make art. While to the untrained eye, sheet music might seem obscure, to a musician the symbols and signs sing the rhythms and melodies no differently than the voices and instruments which might bring the song again to life. In Sirens, if the performance recreates fugal rhythms in cadence and narrative, the opening lines demonstrate what the artist must create in order to inspire or cause that performance. One form complements the other, as Lessing showed. In this way, the captions don't oppose the narrative in Aeolus, they illuminate it. Though the pressmen dress up life with their rhetoric, real life plays out for all to see. In Cyclops, the narrator doesn't mock commentator, rather Joyce demonstrates the two sides of every story, the storyteller's view and how the storyteller sells it to you. And rather than show anything broken, Penelope's narrative reveals the ineluctable dichotomy of life. We live it in a forward motion, free to make our choices, but then are left to reflect upon life as the artifact of the choices we have made, a cognition followed by a recognition, forming another parallel to Joyce's view of art's apprehension. As life is a dance between open choices and choices made, so Joyce reminds us that art's apprehension is a dichotomy, one that requires cooperation between an artist shaping the medium and an audience prepared to grasp the intended sense. If your medium is music, then you must capture the dynamic of the Nacheinander. If you work in paint or stone, seek the pregnant moment in the Nebeneinander. Regardless of medium, though, all art stands as a dialogue, as something between at least two people. Thank you.